The premiere issue of Collector's Fantasy Video Magazine takes a peek at the Doctor Who celebration and tour. Interviews the third Doctor, John Pertwee, and talented new comic artist Craig Brasfield. We'll take you to the 6th convention of the Alabama Record Collectors Association and visit Magnum Opus Con 2, where we met up with Bob Burton.
It's not easy being me. It's a hard business, but it's fun too.
Thousands of fans regularly look forward to the bizarre adventures of the Flaming Carrot, one of the most popular alternative or independent comics on the market today. Carrot creator Bob Burton spent some time telling Collector's Fantasy about his work.
Now this is the first issue I came out with in 1981. Each one was numbered on the back here with a different serial number. There were only 6,500 copies printed. It was a black and white. Now it's going anywhere from $75 to $125 on the collector's market. It's become a collector's item as my circulation has risen over the years. This is going to be my next issue, Flaming Carrot Comics, and I Cloned Hitler's Feet. It's a kind of an unusual story, and it has to do with a lot of boots, you know, attacking and taking over towns, and the mystery men go in and defeat them. I Cloned Hitler's Feet. This is how big I do them. And you can see here, this is the first appearance of Screwball, who is one of my new characters that everybody's real excited about. They like him a lot. And got pretty girls in the strip. Let's see what else we got here. So here they're making the boots. This is original artwork that I take to conventions from time to time. This is one of the characters, Mr. Death, from the story Death Gets Drunk, which came out back in '85. There's a carrot. Here's a pretty good one I'm kind of proud of. That'll probably wind up in a cover somewhere down the road. And here's Mr. Death right here. And this is a character I'm going to draw. You know, I know this character so well I can draw it, you know, pretty much without doing pencils first. When I first came up with these characters, and the reason I came up with them was because I was drawing faces, and then I said, well, it's kind of hard to draw hair. I never really learned to draw hair. Even today, it's one of my weak points. And what happened was, I just finished off the face and I put that stick on there. And we came out with a strip called Adventures in Limbo. It's post-nuclear fiction, adventures after World War 263. And, it was just basically just a goofy idea. Now we've discovered that these faces, when people see them, they're kind of stricken with them. They find them very interesting and intriguing. They say, what does that mean? Where did it come from? What is it? And they just basically enjoy, the strip. Now, unfortunately, we haven't come out with too many of these yet, and that's going to be one of my next projects, is to do a whole series of adventures with these odd characters from Limbo. The carrot is kind of like this. And he's just, kind of rough around the edges type ragged character. The main thing is the eyes. That's of vital importance. And of course, we do this stuff here. And I bring this down here like this and just kind of like... It's kind of primitive, but, that's the way it works. Basically, the comic book is aimed at, it's not really a spoof on comic book characters. It's aimed at the market, say the Monty Python bands, the Firesign Theater. You know, it's that type of humor, that type of character, and it has that type of flavor to it. It's also basically an upbeat strip, and it's happy. In other words, the Carrot is kind of simple-minded, but you know, whenever he gets in a bad spot, you know, he, you know, comes out of it and he's happy again. He doesn't brood. It's sort of an anti-hero. You know, first you had the hero in the classic sense, you know, Jack Armstrong, the all-American boy back in the 40s and the 30s. Then you had the anti-hero who was like, you know, Spider-Man would be brooding and he would have bad luck and one thing or another would happen. Then you have kind of like a reaction to that where it's like, you know, basically an individual is bubbling, vivacious, and not, you know, petty and worried and neurotic about certain things. You know, at the same time, he's got this psychotic outfit on. You know, now that's an interesting subject right there, the whole concept of psychotic, neurotic. You know, neurotic meaning, you know, something petty and not, you know, it's kind of a nuisance, and psychotic meaning something that's dangerous to society. Well, what about the prochotic? In other words, somebody that is psychotic or neurotic only in a positive sense. In other words, you know, not negative or not harming society. And, you know, that's basically where I see myself coming from. You know, insofar as, you know, being able to create something out of thin air that's preposterous, a preposterous proposition, yet, you know, actually survive and do something with it. It's a fun comic to draw. It's a zany concept, and we, you know, enjoy it a great deal.
I can see how you can take Star Trek and you can make it much more glitzy, much more Hollywood. I don't know that you can do that with the formula that makes Doctor Who so popular, because we've never relied on great special effects. We've never been a big budget production. And so would the Doctor translate well into all-conquering superhero a la Hollywood? I don't know. I mean, it would be nice to see somebody come up with a truly brilliant script that kept the sort of the joyous nuances of this intergalactic time traveler and kept him as off the wall as he is and didn't make him into too much of a Hollywood property. Then if somebody felt there was a market for staying true and honest to the theme of the Doctor, then wonderful. We'd love to see it.
Collector's Fantasy talks with up-and-coming artist Craig Brassfield after a visit to Magnum Opus Con 2.
Hello there, I'm Morgan. Welcome to Magnum Opus Con in Columbus, Georgia.
Do you have any particular you know, part of fandom that you really enjoy more than anything else? Did you come to game? Did you come to see the...
No, I came to see all the exhibits and to socialize.
I like the gaming, the masquerades, the panels.
Well, since it's been a long time since I actually came to con, I decided to start off easy and just see the sights and find out what's going up for auction and start slow off there. Buy things if need be, but just get back into the flow of fandom.
I came to see DeForest Kelly.
Are you a big Star Trek fan?
Oh, yeah.
If you've never been to a convention, you're missing out on a great way to spend the weekend. Among the activities here, there was a costume contest, a video room, an art auction, and guest panels and forums. Coming up, you'll see highlights of the dealer's room, artist alcove, art room, a miniature painting workshop, and hear candid comments from artists, writers, and other celebrities. Every collector's first stop is the dealer's room. Housed in the Columbus Iron Works and Trade Center, this cavernous room was filled with comics and books, cards and posters, movie stills, buttons, cutouts, fantasy figurines, crystal balls, and collectibles of all kinds. Even if you're not a serious collector, browsing through the fascinating merchandise, talking with the dealers, and mingling with other fans is part of the fun. Before moving on to convention action outside the dealer's room, let's visit exhibitors with some of the more unusual items on display.
Well, my swords are plain, simple, guaranteed to rust. They're made out of carbon steel. And, you know, we do believe it is much better than weightlifting. However, a sword is a personal item. It's something that is close to the body, it's carried close, it should feel comfortable. I sell my swords not by looks, but by feel. When they can't communicate with it, then it's worth spending the money. Put something on the wall, they're not good. They're guaranteed against breakage for any reason, including deliberate. You want a sword to put on a wall, There's a lot better looking swords on the market. Ours are for practice, stage combat. This is one of the things we started with, stage combat. I use swords myself. I have been trained in using swords at the age of 10. That's when my training started. It hasn't finished yet. I don't believe I know enough. Same way with making blades. My first blade was made 35 years ago, and I'm still learning. I enjoy working out with blades. I enjoy making them.
What's called lost wax casting, and bronze is the metal we're using. We're also using opals for the dragon eyes. Opals have a lot of life to them. It's like the dragons look back at you when you're looking at them. It's a 2-week process at least, from start to finish. You begin with the wax, and then you do the mold, and you do the casting. This is a casting right after the mold has been broken off. All of the casting lines are still on it. It took it 2 weeks to get to this point, and then there's 2 more weeks of finishing it up, of buffing and polishing and coating it. I'm working on a dwarf that's going to be part of a larger sculpture. We're doing up dwarves mining their gold under the earth. And this dwarf is going to be sitting in an elevator coming up out of the mine. Oops, the elevator's already been cast. And he's my first dwarf, and we're going to do many dwarves for the piece before we're all over. But each one will be individual. They won't all look alike. The major part of the sculpture is a huge cypress knee that stands about 3 feet tall and has several different points on it. We've hollowed it out inside, and it will be lit, and it'll have moving parts on it when we're all finished. We were aiming for this summer, but I don't know if we'll have it done or not. A big piece like that, you can't really put a time limit on. You just give it whatever it takes.
Okay, I'm from the Wizard's Nook. My name is Mark Anthony, and we're selling this plasma sphere. It was developed for the movie My Science Project. And what it is, it's boric silicate glass with argon gas, xenon, krypton gas, and 2 other gases that the physicists won't let us know. It's this little trade secret. Basically, it's a Tesla coil inside, putting out a lot of electricity. And it's living plasma. These gases form living plasma. And the only place we know living plasma like this exists is on the surface of the sun, in the aurora borealis, and in lightning bolts, and that's the only place in the universe that we know it exists. And they've captured it and put it into this ball. This will last about 20,000 years, they say, before the gases expire. And it takes about as much wattage as a 40-watt bulb. It tends to attract to your hand and almost give you a Kirlian photograph look. What they've done with this is he's developed it, and whenever we have an order, we have to phone it into him, and he specially makes this. He blows the glass himself, fills up the vacuum tube with the gases, and then sends it out. And if anything should go wrong, we'll replace it free of charge.
The dealer's room is now closed. I repeat, the dealer's room is now closed. Thank you.
Artists in attendance congregate in the Artist Alcove. Lamar Waldron gives us a perspective and talks about his current project.
Behind us here you see Artist Alcove, where you have comic book artists and writers and publishers from probably a dozen different companies at least, and they're all here meeting their fans and talking to each other and telling people that, you know, comic books aren't the same as they've always been. They're changing now, and there are more types of comic books and more different titles coming out now than ever before in American history. And this is the place where comic book fans come to find out about things like that. Right now I'm spending my time writing Micro, which is a new comic book for adults that comes out on a quarterly basis. And that takes up a lot of time because since it's for adults, and I guess that means me, spend a lot of time researching it, trying to make it scientifically accurate, and trying to write it more in the manner of a novel instead of a typical comic book. A lot more depth of characterization, and a lot more complexity in the plot, and that sort of thing.
I'm Bob Burton, author and writer of Flaming Carrot Comics. This is my good friend here, Pete Laird, who draws and writes the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I'm half of the team that draws it.
Half of the team that draws that.
The other half is Kevin Eastman. He's not here right now.
Now, how did you get into all this? I mean, why the Turtles?
Why the turtles? Well, actually, it all started out with a kind of silly joke that Kevin and I came up with when we were living in Dover, New Hampshire. And we didn't have really any good transportation up there, so we had to take the bus back and forth to the next town over. And somehow we just got the idea of these big turtles that lived on the side of the road and like kicked buses. You know, the bus would be going by and they'd kick it and spin it around so it'd be facing the other way. That was kind of the genesis of it. You know, the turtle idea started to gestate from that. So
you just did it as a sort of a lark, and you know, just some zany lark, and it became a massive industry. Now already they're talking about a line of toys and games and things like that. We already have the games,
right, the role-playing games. And toys are in the works as we speak, and talking about animation deals and so forth and so on.
I need to get a good-looking gal to come along and be my girlfriend over here on the side.
Most every convention has a workshop or two. This one takes a steady hand.
We are doing an art competition, and right now people are painting, and I teach technique. We do primarily 25mm three-dimensional art in this room. It's a lot of fun, and people will have a good time. And I run probably one of the quietest workshops around. Do a lot of elbow bumping and spilling paints and this kind of stuff, and we have a very, very good time. I went pro last year, what they consider pro, where I can do the workshops and whatnot, and somebody just said, here, do a class, and the next thing I knew, I had 35 people sitting in a room, age 8 to 64, saying, gee, what are we supposed to do now? I am not a great speaker. I usually let people do hands-on. I think hands-on does most of the teaching.
The art room is your chance to see original works up close.
We come in and set up this art exhibit in one day's time so that the fans can enjoy it for the next 3 days. And on Saturday evening, we have an art auction that we hopefully sell a lot of things for the artists. I think our mainstay is in the amateur division. Does not mean that they are first-time showers, but they are not the professional artists yet. We have people like Doug Chafee. He is an artist that has been a designer and an illustrator for Nassau in Florida, as well as for some paintings in National Geographic magazines. We have people like Mary Hanson Roberts and Ingrid Nielsen, and they are professional people of the fantasy world and in fandom. And then another professional artist is David Dorman, and he does things like G.I. Joe designs for Hasbro toys as well as some comics.
Generally, I'll come up with something, and that's almost part of the game in itself, and it's kind of fun. You play, you know, you live on the edge a little bit. Yeah, and you say, you know, how can I solve this thing in 3 or 4 days when he wants this thing delivered, and come up with something that I won't be ashamed of and will meet their need. And it's a challenge. But unfortunately, the way my business has been in recent years, it's also a brain drain. I mean, it just drains your creativity right out of you. In my records, I'm up to almost to job 1,000. Now that's job 1,000. Now if you take that a job can be anywhere from one painting to as many as 60 illustrations. So that gives you a little bit of idea how many pieces of art I've done and had to create in the last several years. And it numbers into I don't know how many thousands. And after a while, you get to where you feel like you're a production machine.
I've been painting for about 12 to 15 years. I've been doing art, 15 to 16 years. I originally wanted to do comic book work, but I was happier doing the single pieces. And so I got out of doing comics and just concentrated on the painting. And I'm primarily self-taught. I've been picking up techniques from here and there from other artists. And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing the fantasy work.
Everyone looks forward to meeting guest celebrities. Here at Magnum Opus Con 2, Scotty, Sulu, and Dr. McCoy of Star Trek make appearances, as do the second Doctor Who, Patrick Troughton, and the Master, Anthony Ainley. The guests are always smiling and ready to talk. We caught them in action for you.
Okay, come on, you got to sit on my lap, though.
Okay. That's good.
Come on there, you got to put your arm around me and hug me, and pretend you like me.
Okay. I'll do anything. I don't have to pretend.
Okay.
The actual ship, the actual drop ship, was life-size.
It was in a sound stage, but it was live. It was huge, and so the actors were lifted up into the cockpit. You know, Farrow and Spunkmeyer, and they had the cameras, you know, on a crane to look in. So they filmed that separately there, and then and in the loading dock it was there, and the life size and things loaded up. But then when we were in the APC, so we were filmed separately in a small set. But that we didn't drop. I mean, like I said, they just shook it with some 2x4s.
How old are you, Misty? 8. Well, you were born after we were canceled. You know that? There's life after cancellation.
Don't say it like that.
Captain, you are playing with me, huh? And also I noticed that on the last planet you did not get the girl. You should have come to Lucky Pierre. What we have, my favorite, which is Reggie. And he would answer the captain something like this. I'm terribly sorry, sir, but I can't seem to get the little buckets to move very fast.
I may be the most evil genius in the universe, but deep down inside me, there is good.
Your deal. Thank you very much. Yes. Same name.
No, that's Silk. It's S-I-L-K. S-I-L-K-E.
Oh, Silk with an E. That's nice. I like that. Thank you very much. Sure, it's all stuffy and all thing. Drunk as usual.
The camera was ready, the lights were ready, the actors were ready. Leonard said, action, and he zipped across that sound stage like he was doing a 100-yard dash, and our eyes went. Obviously, that take was no good. So Leonard got together with him and said, you got to remember, you're the Enterprise going down in flames. You've got to feel the Enterprise. We don't want you to show off how fast you can run. You've got to run as if you're the Enterprise going down, you know. And so, oh yeah, you're right. We started concentrating on becoming the Enterprise, you know? And we got ourselves all set up. The camera was in the right position, and the lights were in place, and the actors got ourselves properly worked up emotionally, you know. And he got there, he was all, you know, feeling the Enterprise going down. He was feeling the flames, you know, and all that. And Leonard said, action, and he went across, and this time he was really feeling it. However, he was feeling it so much that our eyeballs went like this. He was floating across, feeling the Enterprise. He felt it, but the handkerchief was going like this. So Leonard said, no, cut. No, you got to feel the Enterprise smoothly. I mean, it's not just feeling it, you know. You got to feel it and go this way. And so, oh, you're right. And so again, he got himself all worked up, you know. And by this time, we're, you know, watching it. He was breaking out in beats of perspiration because of the tension as well as all that physical exertion. And, you know, it required a great deal of discipline on the part of the actors also to keep our faces straight. He went back there. And he again got himself all emotionally involved in being the Enterprise and remembered to keep it smooth. And Leonard said action, and the scene started, and he was doing quite well. He was feeling the Enterprise, and our eyes were going across like this until about 3/4 of the way, he tripped. And our flag went down. Poor guy was feeling so intimidated by the whole thing, you know. But that obviously was no good too. So we had to have another take. And finally, when we got the take, the expressions on our faces were very right. But in reality, you know, when you see the tight muscles on our throats and all the, you know, tension on our faces, it wasn't because it was just the Enterprise going down, but we were about ready to burst
went to my first convention in 1968. It was a Worldcon. It was a fascinating experience. I had just gotten into science fiction, and I was at one of the subsidiary hotels since the main hotel was full, and rode back and forth on the bus, you know, the little convention shuttle bus like they've got here, for about 3 days before I figured out that the tall, wizardly-looking gentleman seated next to me was Fritz Leiber. And that's one of the things that can happen to you at a convention is nobody walks around with big posters on. You never know who you're going to run into. I'm having a lovely time here. It's a lovely city. Walked down by the river already. Went to the Columbus Mall yesterday and signed some books. And just generally having a good time, laid back and relaxed. That's what these things are for.
Will the compact disc have an adverse effect on record collectors? We'll find out after a visit with comic artist newcomer Craig Brassfield.
Years of work have paid off for talented new artist Craig Brassfield. After doing a few Zoomtown backups in Nexus for First Comics, Craig's work was featured in issue number 47 of Marvel's Alpha Flight, and he has also begun work on his original new limited series, The Wayfarers. Collector's Fantasy asked Craig to tell us about breaking into comic book art.
I was late getting into comics. It was about age 16 or so, towards the end of high school, before I really started thinking about doing them. And when I did, I didn't even think about working for Marvel or DC. Originally, I was just going to start my own company. I didn't see any problem with that. When I was in high school, I started sending sketches on notepads and notebooks, anything, to Marvel and asking for help, asking what they recommended. And they would send me back a form letter saying, you're not good enough yet. And I wasn't asking for work. I was asking, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? Where do I need to be before I can send things? So for a while, I just practiced myself, and then I started going to conventions once I got to the level of doing pages and actually doing 3 or 4 page continuities. Mostly it's just practice that makes you a good artist, just drawing from life. You start growing by leaps and bounds when you get away from looking at comics. It's a lot in layout and design and getting the message across the best way possible. In '85, the Atlanta Fantasy Fair, I met Carl Potts and Rick Oliver and Jim Owsley. And they all promised to give my work consideration. If I'd send them copies, continue sending them updates, that they would keep me in mind for things. And finally, Carl Potts and Rick Oliver did send me work. See, the first thing I did was the Zoomtown backup in Badger. That was already canceled before I got on it, so I kind of experimented there. I did some American flag pages for Rick Oliver. He was real enthusiastic, and he sent me the Zoomtown story, said they had had an artist for flag already. And that was the first, I guess, professional paying job, was the 4 issues of Badger. The Alpha Flight story was a mixture. It was inventory and some things were changed, and I didn't do the whole issue, and so they needed someone to come in to fill the end of it. It was kind of a jam issue. Terry Austin, that was my highlight of my career now. I've had 2 pages inked by Terry Austin. Probably Jim Starlin is my all-time favorite idol. Just love his work. I can do a real good Jim Starlin imitation if he ever wants to step aside and have me fill in for him. Paul Smith is really good. He brings in a real good, crisp, clean style I like. Steve Rude right now is who I'm mainly looking at. Then others, Gil Kane, Dave Cockrum, Michael Golden. Dave Stevens is not bad, sure. Actually, what I like best about Dave Stevens is his inks. I'd like to see him do more inking. There's plenty of good pencilers, but there's not that many really, really fine inkers. Wayfarers is a amalgam of stories. It's a little Star Wars, a little Tolkien, a little everything. It starts with the basic superhero group and then takes off into realms of science fiction and fantasy and espionage and intrigue. And it's probably going to be about 15 issues. It's a lot like Watchmen or Mage, in that we know exactly where it's going to end right now. We're just not sure how we're going to get there. And it's got definite plans in mind. It probably seems a little aimless at first, but we have a definite story to tell. And I think it'll be really good. I'm still mainly a collector. I still think of myself as a fan and a reader. I'll give just about anything a try. The favorites right now are probably everybody's favorites: Watchmen, Nexus, Swamp Thing, The Nom, Cerebus. Need to mention some Marvels in there, don't I?
Our exclusive preview of the Doctor Who celebration and tour follows our coverage of the 6th annual get-together of the Alabama Record Collectors Association.
The Alabama Record Collectors Association, ARCA for short, was founded in Birmingham in 1981. Currently, ARCA has 3 chapters in the state, with members nationwide and in Canada. Collectors Fantasy talked with founder Fred Dalkey about the beginnings of ARCA and events at this year's show.
Record collecting for the 50s and 60s was the basic reason for starting the Alabama Record Collectors Association. There was no state organization of its kind, and basically the idea came along of wanting to meet other people that collect records and also to find records for myself. Normally, when the dealers come in on Friday night, we have a party for them. They've had a long trip. We have dealers come from Canada, from all over the United States. And when they arrive, we try to make them feel welcome, comfortable, Southern tradition type. On Saturday night, we normally have a big party for all the dealers and the members of the club. And they can bring friends, and we have a real good time just playing some of the old rock and roll on up to some present stuff.
Well, we're here to promote and preserve recorded music and try and put people together with the records that they want. I had never, ever seen any kind of an event like this until I became involved with the record collectors. I was a record collector for about 20 years before I ever joined a record collecting club. It never even occurred to me that there might be such a thing as a record collecting club. Today, we have things here, I'd say there's probably at least 500,000 records in this room, if not more than that. And they include absolutely everything, and I mean, there's stuff that I've never even heard of. I can't imagine why it's on vinyl, and it's here. So, you know, all the doo-wop stuff is here. All of the great country is here. All of the elevator music is here. All of the hard chainsaw rock and roll is here. ZZ Top is real hard to come by because I've talked to 3 collectors about ZZ Top albums, and they've all said the same thing. I asked 3 of them, I said, have you got any ZZ Top? And they all say the same thing, not for sale. So I guess ZZ Top is a favorite among record dealers, I guess. They like to hold on to the ZZ Top album. Well, we've aligned ourselves with a charity this year for the first time. We are technically a non-profit organization. So what we've decided to do is that we're going to just assassinate any profit that we might come in line for just by donating a percentage of our door receipts to the children of slain police officers. It's a local charity, and it's worked to our benefit to align ourselves with a local charity because it opens a lot of publicity doors for you and helps you have a successful event. It's helped us get some cooperation from sponsors, I think, over and above what we might have had if it were strictly an ARCA event. And it gives you a good feeling.
The most collectible item we have is the Beatles Butcher cover, $200. It was released in 1966. The Beatles were angry at Capitol Records. They were eliminating and changing and altering the albums they submitted to be released. And to retaliate, they released an album cover called the Butcher cover because they felt Capitol was butchering their albums with raw meat, broken dolls, in butcher smocks. And of course the public reacted angrily and rejected it, and consequently Capitol pulled the album and pasted another cover over this one, which is itself a collectible, highly collectible album.
Homer Jethro!
And, it seems the records that are the least popular now in 10 years will be the most collectible because very few copies are being bought. And a lot of them are sent back and destroyed, and as the years progress, they get rarer and rarer, and an artist may become, a member of a group may become more popular. You know, he may join another group, he may go solo, and then his items become collectible, like ZZ Top's Moving Sidewalks. They were in a group called Moving Sidewalks. Mamas and the Papas were the Mugwumps. Creedence was the Gollywogs, you know, and so they become more collectible.
The compact disc has had a major effect on the record industry. Collectors Fantasy ask exhibitors how they think CDs will affect record collecting.
The question arises, in I think many minds, will CDs replace the record?
And in some cases, yes, probably with pop music and classical and so forth. But you're always going to have the collector, and there are millions of them in this country and around the world, and they will always want a record. They want to play it, they want to touch it, they want to look at the jacket, and they don't want a little small silver-plated CD.
CDs are a great way to get some really clean material. I own 6 so far, and probably will buy more as the material becomes available. But it doesn't look like it's going to quite replace records. There'll still be material that will never be available on CD, in my opinion.
There's a possibility of it increasing more people wanting to buy records, because now they know that compact discs are in and records can become more valuable and more rare.
We're hoping that records will still continue to be collectible, but we don't know. It's everybody's debating it. At conventions like this, we all sit around after the show and talk about it and discuss it. But you can tell from the crowds here that the record industry is still going strong.
The Doctor Who celebration, presented by Lionheart Television, the BBC in America, and Public Broadcasting, will have visited more than 70 cities over the course of its American tour. Collector's Fantasy recently had the opportunity to preview this fantastic traveling exhibition and spoke with the producer of the tour, Brian Sloman, who gave us a little background on the Doctor and the tour.
Well, at the moment, all our energies are being directed towards a television show called Doctor Who, which, of course, is the longest-running science fiction program in the history of television worldwide, and is a particularly important program for the BBC in the United States, as it's now seen on something in the order, Chris, of 180 plus PBS television markets coast to coast. And so it crosses this tremendous spectrum of people who want to follow the adventures of this Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, this man who was bored with a near-perfect existence on his home planet and who decided to wander the universe. Not so much righting wrong wherever he finds it. I mean, we don't pretend to be as moral as programs like Star Trek, and we don't pretend that our Doctor's not a meddler. What I think is so marvellous about the concept of Doctor Who is that the Doctor totally admits that he really can't mind his own business. And so, of course, he falls across most of his situations rather than trying in a calculated manner to cure a situation. He tends to be faced with all his greatest adventures by mistake. And the lovely thing as a viewer, I believe it's much more realistic than most science fiction programs that have ever been seen on television, because you're never certain, right until the very end of every story, that the Doctor's actually going to vanquish evil. Because I remember there's one lovely scene with Tom Baker where he'd actually run out of ideas of how to deal with one particular monster, and in total frustration he put his hand in a pocket and extricated a jelly baby, a popular form of English candy, and stood there threatening this 10'3" monster with a jelly baby. Marvellous bluff, which actually didn't work, and so he had to use his wit to get out of other situations. So you can see with that quirky style of British humour, it's not a program you can just dip into, watch an episode and come away. But if you like science fiction, you'll undoubtedly like Doctor Who. But I think more importantly, if you enjoy quirky, zany British humour with the best of script writing, superb acting, lovely production team, then you're going to get a kick, going to get a charge out of becoming a fan of the Doctor. So we were faced with a consideration of how to give something back to the public broadcasting viewers in America. I mean, after all, they are responsible for a very, very large percentage of funding for PBS. And we felt that with the popularity of the show, it was time that we, the BBC, gave something back to those viewers. And I think the nicest thanks we can give them is to have been able to bring over all original pieces, props, the various monsters and villains, the original K9, the Doctor's pet dog, and to have brought those characters in the form of an exhibition, which is currently touring the United States and will be here throughout 1987. But of course, to tour the country without having a Doctor would be folly, and so the real star of the show is that in every city, all the 77 cities that we intend visiting this year, we will have a Doctor. One of the Doctors, one of the now 7, as of tomorrow morning in England, when the announcement of the 7th Doctor is made, one of the doctors will be with us at all times. And the doctors come along, chat about their careers, answer all the fun and cheeky questions that the fans have got to ask them about their lives as the Doctor and what they've been up to for the last few years. And then, bless their hearts, they take time out to sign autographs for everybody that comes along to the tour. So I hope we give people a genuine, 2.5 to 3.5 hours of entertainment, because when they're not walking through the exhibition, when they're not enjoying the company of a Doctor, we are also putting on special documentary-type features, documentary pieces of television that have been made about the program over the years. And so it's TV material that the fans wouldn't have had a chance to see normally in the comfort of their own home.
And after the first episode, which some of you may have seen, that one where I fall out of the TARDIS dressed as Patrick Troughton in his trousers, which were extremely tight. I joined the Luton Girls Choir. And then I pinched all these fancy clothes, you know, from the... you all see the first one, Spearhead from Space? No? Yes. Some of you did. And I pinched a velvet jacket from an eccentric old man in a cloak and various articles of clothing from other people, and I went outside and I pinched his old motor car. And then when the Brigadier said to me, well, now, Doctor, what is your name? And he said, Smith, John Smith. So if anybody wants to know what his name is, the only time he's ever said what his name is, and his name was John Smith.
I mean, the love that comes across the footlights in America is absolutely startling. It's quite different. Fandom in America and fandom in England are two very opposed things. Much greater in the States. Much more, everybody's much more effusive and much more erudite about the program. So this is why this tour that I'm doing now, with the distributors, with Lionheart, and they've incorporated with BBC Enterprises. This is really properly run, beautifully run. And I'm by myself, I'm not with anybody else, just myself and the travelling exhibition, which was displays of, in a big trailer of Daleks and special effects and Cybermen and that sort of thing.
The entire exhibition was built solely for the American market. Nothing like this has been contemplated in England. But it's purely the vastness, Chris, of this nation of yours that meant them having high mobility as such a crucial element of the tour, because we couldn't, for instance, have static pieces that you would just put onto a truck and then had to take to a museum and unload. We wouldn't have been able to do it. So it was crucial that the massive tractor-trailer unit actually was a self-contained exhibition vehicle, and that's the only way we are able to get around. Also, 1988 is the 25th anniversary of the show. The program has been seen for all of those years in Australia, and there's some talk at the moment of taking the exhibition down under.
That'd be great.
Which would be fun. Which would be fun. Americans seem to be having a love affair with Australia right now, and I share that. It's a nation I'd love to get to see, so how can you see it any better than with a Doctor and his TARDIS? Really? We'd probably land in the wrong place, of course, you know, with a Doctor's ability to sort of press the wrong buttons in his spaceship. Yeah, we would probably end up somewhere in Indochina.
The tentative tour schedule, dates, and locations will appear following the program. Contact your local public broadcasting station for more information. While on tour with the exhibition, Collector's Fantasy interviewer and fellow countryman Paul Jenkins had a conversation with the third Doctor, actor John Pertwee.
Before his name became synonymous with Doctor Who, in fact, long before that series was created, John Pertwee was already well known to British radio listeners as an extremely funny comedian. For many years, the nation enjoyed a rollicking comedy called The Navy Lark, and John built on that success to become an artist of international repute. Now, of course, he has fans around the world who know him as the third Doctor Who. In view of that, John, I hope you didn't mind me describing you as a comedian.
I'm delighted. That's the hardest thing to be anyway.
The Navy Lark was about a Royal Naval ship called HMS Troutbridge, and it featured Leslie Phillips, a classic English character actor. And I remember your character was something of a wheeler-dealer, sort of a con man in the,
That's right.
in the sense of the word. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the Navy, I had done a lot of radio prior to that. When I was in the Navy, I joined up with a man called Eric Barker, and we did a show called Waterlogged Spar, which is a naval version. And then we bought the rights and ran it as a civilian show. And so I played a lot of characters at that time. And when they asked me to do a new series of my own, they said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, let's do something based on the Navy, because I was in the Navy and I had a knowledge of the background of the Navy from the lower deck to the upper deck. And this is how it all started. But when I first started in the show, we ran 20 years, incidentally. And when we first started in it, I was playing just one character, which was a Cockney Chief Petty Officer. Chief Petty Officer Pertwee, talking like that, ain't it? It's Cockney, you know. And he was always on a fiddle, you know, working out the rabbits and all that, you see. Rabbits means pinching things, you know. And my feed, who did all the character, most of the character voices, the eccentric characters, was now a very eminent actor, now seen in America, and the two Ronnies, Ronnie Barker. And Ronnie was playing those characters. But when Ronnie left after some 8 years, the producer, Alistair Scott Johnston, said, well, what do you want to do now? Who shall we get to take Ronnie Barker's place? I said, nobody, or I'll kill you. I want to go back to doing what I always did, which was playing characters. So from then on, I played about 42 different characters in the show.
I remember enjoying it very much. If anybody had told you then, in those halcyon days of radio, that you were destined to do a television series about a planet-hopping eccentric who travelled through time in a telephone kiosk, do you think you would have told them they were crazy?
Yeah, I think it probably would, yes. I'd never seen Doctor Who, in fact. Yes, I did. I saw once, because I was previously married to an actress called Jean Marsh, which you know in America very well, from Upstairs, Downstairs originally. And Jean was in it, and so she said, well, do watch it and see me. And so I saw a few episodes that she was in, but I couldn't really follow the program because I was working then in the theatre, ostensibly, and I didn't have a chance to see it because I was on the stage at the time when it was shown and transmitted. So I had no idea at all that I'd ever be in it. The way I got it was rather extraordinary, because it was Ronnie Barker in the Navy Lark who told me that Patrick Troughton, my predecessor, was leaving. And he said, why don't you get in touch with the BBC and see if they'd be interested in you playing it. And so I rang my agent, and there was a terrible pause on the end of the telephone when I suggested it. And I said, right, forget the whole thing. He said, no, I don't think it's a very good idea, but I'll try it. And he rang up the BBC and spoke to the then producer, Derek Sherman, and said, what about John Pertwee to play the part of Doctor Who and take over from Pat Troughton? And there was another dreadful pause on the telephone, and Richard, my agent, said, yes, I had exactly the same reaction. I think it's a dreadful idea. And they said, no, not at all, we're staggered, because your client's name that you've just mentioned is second on our shortlist.
Goodness.
And I had been for 18 months, and I had no idea at all. So when I was offered the role, I said, well, how do you want me to play it? And Sean Sutton, then the head of program, said, well, I'd like you to play it as John Pertwee. And I said, well, who the hell's John Pertwee? I've never played me. I'd always hidden under a green umbrella, and I'd never played me at all. And he said, well, just play it as you, and it'll sort itself out. And after a couple of episodes, I think it did. It was my idea that we became much more adventuresome. It was my idea to incorporate my love of gadgetry and riding motorbikes and flying helicopters and hovercraft and speedboats and everything like that. And anything new that was invented that went on wheels or flew, I would grab and we'd put it in the show, because I liked doing that myself anyway. And also the use of Venusian karate, which was a joke, Aikido, which my excellent stuntman Terry Walsh taught me. And but it was easier because the baddies rushed at me and I took the baddies and went with them, you know. It looks very pretty, but not very difficult to do. I would think really that my favorite monster and threat was the Draconians, because that was the first time we used the half mask, which I prefer to those rather silly masks of the Ice Warriors, and where you just get a slit in the rubber and voices come out and talk through slits, which isn't very effective. But when you use the half mask, where you use the human eye and the mouth, this way you don't lose expression. And I thought they were startlingly original and alarming, with all the warts all over the faces and the high coxcomb. It was an interesting morning once, about 5 o'clock in the morning. We were filming an episode and waiting for the sun to come up. And the fellow playing the leading Draconian was a great authority on astrology and the stars and space. And he started to talk to us about space and if there was life in space and so on. And I was listening to him for about 20 minutes, and suddenly I caught myself out, and I realized that for 20 minutes I'd been believing this man was a man from outer space. And somebody said, right, tease up, or something. And it suddenly shook me, and it gave me a terrible sort of culture shock to come down to earth. I really was gone at that time. It was the most extraordinary experience, I think, of my life.
Planet of the Spiders was the final episode that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Many people consider it was to be the finest that you did. Is that your particular favorite? Or
No, not at all. I like the Planet of the Spiders. I like the Green Death, too, with all those dreadful maggots. Katie and I had to act with horror at maggots crawling across the floor in front of us, but they were in fact about 300 yards away in another studio. It was all done with color separation overlay. And Katie being completely blind and myopic, and she couldn't see a thing, and she couldn't see the monitors up there to see where, in fact, the maggot was in relation to where we were sitting. So I could take a quick peek at it to see so that my eye line would be right watching it. And the maggot would be coming in, and I'd go, look, and Katie go, oh no, and I'd say no, because she couldn't see what it was doing or where it was. But that was fun. I enjoyed that. But my most favorite was The Demons. The Demons isn't widely seen in America. They banned it for some strange reason. It's about black magic, and but it was very spooky because we shot it the whole thing on film, which was a rare thing to happen. So the quality was very good, and we shot it down amongst the barrows, which are these early Saxon burial grounds. And the atmosphere was very spooky indeed up there at night, really was. And we had wind machines, and so the effects were done with winds. And the only monster was, in fact, a big satyr at the end that grew to an enormous height in the church in the village, summoned by the master.
Roger Delgado, he first played the Doctor's arch nemesis,
yes,
the Master. He was a good friend of yours.
Very, one of my greatest friends, yes.
Some people believe that his death led to your decision to leave the show.
It was one of the reasons, yes. Well, the team broke up. Barry Letts, the producer, he had been an extremely good actor in his day, and that's why he was such a good director, because he could see it from both sides, you know, from the camera and production side, and also from the point of view of the actor. So he didn't ask too much of the actor. And Terry Dix, who was the editor, he left. And it looked like, and Roger was killed, and it looked like the end of an era, really, so that's why I decided to leave. Coupled with the fact that I asked the BBC for some more money, and I said, if you don't pay me a little bit more money, I think I'll leave. And they said, like, how much? And I told them, and they said, we're very sorry to see you go. And I said, well, don't we have a meeting about this? And they said, no, the budget won't allow for that. I didn't ask for much.
Did you miss the role when you left?
No, not really. 5 years is a long time. I was very happy to have had 5 good years out of it. And I then went into a show, a highly original show, a crime quiz show called Who Done It. I think people thought it was Doctor Who Done It. So we got a large audience of people, I think, that were Doctor Who fans. And that ran for 4 years. And then I went into my present series, which has been running for now nearly 8 years, called Wurzel Gummidge, which is about a scarecrow.
That's based on children's books, isn't it?
It is indeed. Barbara Eufen Todd's books in the 30s, yeah. It's about a scarecrow who comes to life through the eyes of 2 little kids who are going down to a farm for a holiday.
Wurzel is a West Countryman, you see. He speaks in a sort of Somerset,
which is what we call Somerset, or country Devon and Somerset.
And Wurzel, in fact, it wouldn't be difficult from America to understand him, because when you think of it, he says ask.
And you say ask. We say ask.
Of all the places that you've traveled, if somebody said, okay, John, tomorrow, you know, the travel stops, you've got to stay in one place, where would it be?
I think England, my home. It's the most livable place in the world, I've found. Just to live, to have my home, but it would not keep me sedentary for too long. I'd be off traveling. I'm an inveterate traveler and will go on until I drop.
On the motorbike?
No, my wife won't come on the back of a motorbike anymore. She used to, but she doesn't any longer. But if I had my way, yes, I'd go around the world on a motorbike.
Finally, John, you're reputed to have a trademark identification when you show up at these conventions and you enter the room. I believe it's proclaiming that indeed you are the Doctor.
Oh, yes. I am the Doctor. Yes, with the cloak.
As we look forward with anticipation to Sylvester McCoy's portrayal as the 7th Doctor Who, we paid tribute to the 2nd Doctor, Patrick George Troughton. Sadly, his final public appearance was at Magnum Opus Con 2. As we found out firsthand, Mr. Troughton was a kind and gentle person who genuinely touched everyone he met.
Patrick Troughton, the 2nd Doctor Who, came by and signed autographs for all the dealers. He was very gentlemanly, very nice, just made a wonderful impression on all of us.
There's a great belief that Pat Troughton and I hate each other's guts. In fact, we adore each other. We're tremendously close friends. But we started this war from the 3 Doctors many years ago. We sort of bit and scrabbled and sort of niggled each other. And this sort of caught on, so in conferences we pretend to fight and hate each other and so on, but it's all a big act. We're very fond of each other.
I had an opportunity to be with him a little bit, converse, and I found him to be just one of the most warm and charming, just very human. Couldn't do enough for you, heart of gold, very accepting, loving what he was doing, very good to the fans, to the people that work with him. He's just an all-around type of guy that there's way too few of, and will be sorely missed.
While covering Magnum Opus Con 2, the staff of Collector's Fantasy stayed at the Ramada City Center in the heart of downtown Columbus, Georgia. For worldwide Ramada reservations, call 1-800-2-RAMADA.
And that's Tom Baker, isn't it? Well, when you get to Logopolis, you'll get to the part where I hurl him from a great height and he's vanished. He dies. Peter Davison emerges. That's the end of Logopolis. It's a nice show. Get her to watch it, and then you might convert her. And make her watch it. Yeah. It was the golden age of Doctor Who, Logopolis. Am I right? You're right. Well, all right.
Oh, all the exotic things that we've autographed. Pants legs are not the only thing.
You saw my legs too?
Oh, sure. We've done bodies. Oh, and you've got a little hole here for me as well. I'll have to work around that. There.
That's, as far as I know, the first science fiction novel that begins in a bowling alley in Albuquerque.
So where'd you get the sunglasses?
My wife buys all my clothes. She likes shopping in Hollywood. She likes shopping, Dolly Parton kind of clothes. If there was brothels or us, she would have fun shopping. She just likes those clothes. She likes flash. I didn't bring the cobra skin sneakers. They have these sneakers you can buy. They're made called snakers.